conversation and enjoying talking about how each one of us have determined how we have achieved our own personal freedoms. And personal freedom is what I want to talk about. Our nation separation from England is a great one to celebrate, but we have to also consider what about our own personal freedoms and autonomy that this country has supported us in having. How do we how do we maintain those freedoms? How do we actually create them? Many of those that we have lost over the years, just out of society's own agenda, and many times the dictates of beliefs that we've had in the past. Those are the issues that I think we have to look at and really be aware of in our own life and how we are looking ahead at our future, but also living for today. Now more than ever, the word freedom is both very timely and personal. We live in a world that celebrates convenience and comfort most of the time, but often at the cost of control over our time, our finances, and even to our future. Freedom isn't something that's handed to us, it's something that we have to build, protect, and reclaim many times against all odds. Together, we're going to explore what freedom really means to each one of us, not just historically, but in our own lives. Freedom from systems that limit our potential, freedom to choose how we live and how we work and how we contribute. Freedom built through intention, investment, and the right relationships. And I believe relationships are really the key to much of what I've ascertained and course corrected in my own life. So my hope is that these conversations will provoke a deeper thinking, an honest reflection, and ultimately a renewed commitment to building a life where freedom isn't just a feeling, but it's a reality. And today I'm going to go monologue. Yes, without a guest. I think my guest conversations are amazing, but I've had many people reach out and say, "Well, David, we love those conversations, but we'd like to just hear from you." So straight up, I'm going to come today without a conversation, but actually coming with my own thoughts based on many years of reflection, many years of mining my own history, my pathway, what led me to create my freedom in life, how that happened, and what I love to do more than anything today, and that is to provoke the deeper thinking of other people. And I mean provoke it in a positive way, obviously. I don't mean to be antagonistic, but I needed the same thing in my life, is to have a mirror put up way back years ago when I thought I was on the path to creating what I thought was supposed to be the best life ever and controlling my destiny. And I was in control of very little back then, particularly when my own daughter had suffered through multiple health crises. And I kept trying to bat those away, not bat them away in so doing, saying, well, I've got this. And those are minor blips, but I'm going to get through this. And the problem is I went back to the same structure, the same hard work ethic, which we have to have in life. I'm not taking away from discipline and working hard, but how long do we have to work hard, and particularly to the sacrifice of our own autonomy? There's a blend, there's a stratus, if you will, that I believe everybody goes through to get there. The problem is most people don't know how to transfer their active income, their earned income, their chosen field, career, employment, profession, their business, and transfer the active work that we so learn to do through our education, and transfer that work ethic into assets. And I like tangible assets that can produce what I call today replacement income. Replacement income means I don't have to go to work for that income. I've built something, I've created something, I've acquired something, I've invested in something that has the ability to produce more regular, sustainable income. Now, there's two sides of going down this pathway. To have enough capital to invest in something, build something, we have to start with what we've got. And usually when we're young, like I was and you were many years ago, or maybe you are today, you don't have a capital base. You have your training, your education, maybe your license, and you have energy to put to that. Well, that is where you start. It's like rubbing two sticks together to start a fire. You have to rub until finally you crack those embers and it starts to take off, and then you can nurture that fire. But we've got to start with something, and that's where the friction, the work comes into play. So keeping that in mind, the issue that I see many people get into, and that is as their efforts create more income, that also creates the opportunity for a bigger expanded lifestyle. Now, I'm not against expanding one's lifestyle. The problem is society has really dictated to us that real success is about what many times what our lifestyle looks like. And that if we have a certain income that we earn, a certain status in the industry, the profession that we're in, that we're supposed to have the look of having those things that show that we've achieved a certain status. And that's a problem. It's a problem because many people will live up to and beyond the income they're able to create. And the allowance to do that is through credit expansion. If you work hard and have a good income, then lenders, credit card companies, banks will afford us the ability to live beyond our means because we look like we're the part that will work hard enough to make up for that and pay the interest and pay the principal back. The problem is that gets into a treadmill effect. And so, whereas I'm not a full proponent of Dave Ramsey, who I think speaks to the masses and probably in a very good way, I do speak to the fact that we should not expand our consumption debt beyond our means to pay that back, and also still have a margin, a safe harbor margin that we're always pulling off the table and putting that aside first into savings and then learning how to multiply that investment through various vehicles that we can use today. And I'm not going to go deep dive into all the vehicles. My preference, my preference for the majority of investing, as many of you know, is in tangible assets, hard assets, those assets that are just in fact closer to the earth. So that starts with actually what's in the earth. That could be minerals, that could be precious metals, to name a few things. It could be land. It certainly is real estate. Uh, Businesses that also use real estate. I'm not against any other kind of investment that people want to go into. I just want to have something that's a core that I can understand, I can learn about, and I can make definitive choices. I'm not able or not smart enough or not invested enough in Wall Street to understand how to do the same thing on Wall Street. I think Wall Street is more of a buy the market, buy the trend, buy the fad. And having some allocations there is not a negative thing at all. But I think we have to look at where we're on the market cycles today, and particularly the longer term secular cycle, and realize that what we've had in the past 40 years, what we've had in the last 15 years, those are anomalies. And if you're able to ride those anomalies in a positive way, then that's just good timing. But to predict our future, predict our ability to ride those anomalies going forward, I think is a mistake. So, not taking away from the inspiration and aspiration that many of us have felt, I certainly have been a part of that, but thinking that's going to carry us the rest of the way into the next decades, I think is a fool's game. And I know it's hard to listen to that, to hear that, because we all want what's been in the past to continue forever, to continue investing however we've been investing, and for the most part, doing well. Most part, all asset classes have done pretty darn well in the last 40 years and certainly the last 15 years. But to believe that that's going to continue on, I think, is again a fool's game. And so we have to learn to diversify, to hedge our bets, and to learn how to do that, I think is very, very important today. Not just to abdicate our financial future to Wall Street or financial advisors or money managers who make their living off of Wall Street. Certainly, again, nothing wrong with having some capital in Wall Street and having some liquidity there. But I think to base the majority of one's future on that construct, I think is a big mistake. So how do you do it? How do you invest in alternatives, tangible assets, hard assets? Well, number one, you have to learn about it. It's not as easy as just going out and looking at your Facebook feed and seeing all kinds of promotions for investments in various asset classes that are promising double digits all the way to the 20%, 30%, 40%. I've seen 60% plus. And I would say to anybody who's playing that game, that's a gamble. That's a big gamble. In this marketplace today, I think trying to stretch it and get the high leverage returns that we've been fortunate in many cases to achieve in the past years is again a fool's game. The marketplace is not going to produce those results without un, 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 undoing risk that is going to take a lot of people down. In fact, we're seeing that in some of the real estate asset classes that we rode uphill in a positive way, but we're seeing how the marketplace is changing and actually going through a disinflation period there. Haven't seen it overall in the financial markets, but I think that's because the financial markets are heavily sentiment driven, behaviorally driven. And of course, as long as the government, the Federal Reserve, keep kicking the can down the road as long as they can, that can keep certain asset classes pumped up, but very artificially. My point is, learn to take chips off the table. When you do, you've got to know where to put those chips. Diversification, again, moving from one asset class, one cycle to another, is one of the things that you can learn. And I think that's a big part of what we need to do today. So, some personal reflections. As we approach July 4th, we'll celebrate Independence Day as we should, reflecting on the birth of our country, the freedoms that we gained through our forefathers who fought against the tyranny to give us the freedom of choice, the freedom of independence, the right of us as individuals to choose our own path. The 4th of July, Independence Day, is not only a reminder of our country's freedom, but also an invitation to reflect on the deeper kind of freedom that I'm here to talk to you about today. And that's our personal freedom that we hold for ourselves to live our life on our own terms. I didn't know what that meant many years ago. I thought that going down the road and having an academic background to gain a license to quote be my own boss in a professional field, that was all about autonomy and freedom. And certainly it allows one by working hard and diligently to produce a well above average income and therefore a well above average lifestyle for our families. Nothing wrong with that. And I think that's where we do get to hold the course of our future. The problem again is that it's easy to live beyond our means because that's the expectation. And it's okay because we can live to fight another day and we have the ability to pay off credit and expand our footprint uh, in our own lives to bigger house, bigger houses, bigger lifestyle, uh, vacation homes and bigger vacations and the luxuries that go along with that. I'm not here to judge that. I'm just saying that until one reaches true financial independence dictated by your lifestyle. So your lifestyle dictates that because as long as you have to keep working to maintain that lifestyle, then you're not truly free. You may feel rich, you may feel good, but at the end of the day, you're not free. The wake up call for me, as many of you know, was when my daughter had gone through her multiple health crises. And really, the one that was the real call to arms for me was at age 12 when she was in end stage liver failure, fighting for her life once again. And there I am, David, the father, the husband, being financially responsible as we all are, but being torn between when do I get to spend time with my daughter when I have the other obligations. And by doing some very quick back of the napkin calculations, some basic math, I looked to see what I had built. And what I had built, certainly through a practice, but my practice was I didn't build a practice to necessarily sell it and turn the money over and take a big capital gain back to put somewhere else. I mean, the business we build and thrive in is something that for most people, that's a course of a relatively long game. Certainly for most people, it's 30, 40 years. And again, nothing wrong with that, as long as you can shift your gears at some point and take some of the obligation responsibility off yourself. That's where you bring in other people. You delegate and bring in and leverage the skills and the time of other people, whether that's through associate models or partnership models. To me, that's the way you start to migrate that. Or if you find something that's even more of a passion, which having the time off from my practice when my daughter Jenna's health crisis caused that provocation in me to say, is there a way for me to take some time off to buy some time back when she was 12 years old and going through her remediation in her liver transplant to save her life? I really, really wanted that time. But there's a big guilt complex that comes along with that, of course. Well, what do I do if I'm not working and producing the income that I've been blessed to produce? Am I should I have guilt about that? Am I not being as dedicated to the cause as I should be? That guilt can ride with us everywhere because other people will look and say, well, why would you even think of selling your practice? That's like the golden goose. Well, it is a golden goose as long as I'm in there prompting that golden goose to produce. But what I realized was that there were better ways to do it. And certainly I learned a lot about the practice model and how I could provide a platform for other people to produce where I didn't have to produce as much. That was part of the lessons learned that I would never have thought of because I thought I had to be the one always. Many of you are on that path. Many of you have dipped your toe in or maybe have made great strides towards taking a good business model in your passion and employing the skills and abilities and time of other people. Now that takes additional effort. It takes additional leadership, as you know. It's not a straight shot. It comes with twists and turns. But I think if you really look hard at that model, you can make a change without selling the golden goose, as many people have done in the last few years, is to build it and sell it, build it and sell it. And that's okay if you've got a next in place. But I think at a young age, if you harvest too early, then your problem is, where do I put that capital? When that equity was in your practice, in your business, well, you knew what to do with it. You went to work. You kept creating the service model that produced the income and also a value that someday you would harvest. But if you harvest too early, even though it feels good to have that big check, you've got to make that check work. Well, how do you do that when all you know is what you've done in your business, in your practice? This is where I believe, education and learning more about creating those multiple streams of income, diversifying into other assets that are not just about the accumulation game, stacking it, stacking it, stacking it, hoping someday you have enough to start depleting, depleting, depleting. To me, again, that's a fool's game. Why would you want a model that looks like that? But yet that's the traditional financial model that's been delivered to us over decades. I believe that model is over. It's gone. It can be part of your building the net worth. I'm not taking that away at all. But if you rely on that for your exit plan, many are waking up to the point that they have no control over that. And they get right to the place where they'd like to, quote, retire, like to slow down, make the exit. And then they start looking at the numbers and saying, well, wait a minute. Do I have enough there to replace the lifestyle that I've created? And if you don't know how to make your money work for you, and it's just about the accumulation game and just riding with the markets, that's where people get very tentative because they realize that's probably not going to work. The markets are quite volatile, and I think we're in a very volatile period right now. So if you leave everything in the market, hoping that it just keeps going higher, that's where people get a nasty surprise. I've seen it in many market cycles previously. The last major one was 2008, the Great Financial Crisis. Many people who got off the active income treadmill with a certain amount of capital assets, most of it in the market, found out very quickly that that big drop, that big correction over 50% in the S&P back between 2008 and 2009 was a major downturn that they weren't expecting. They weren't diversified. For me, I was very diversified. In fact, I had very little in the financial markets, and I had most of my capital in the tangible assets, which where I was diversified didn't take the big hit. Oh, I'm not saying that there's any asset that is clear of any kind of economic downturn, but how much is it risk? How much of a downside risk is one taking? And I just found that the tangible assets that I was invested in rode through that 2008 with very little friction, very little uh, loss at all. In fact, I took no loss because I didn't sell anything because those assets actually were producing income. Even in a downturn, they continue to produce eggs like the golden goose. I didn't have to sell the golden goose. I wasn't in a need to sell it. Now today, have I made additional shifts in the marketplace? Absolutely. Because I've seen again over many decades of experience looking at how asset bubbles are created and what happens when they deflate. And so making shifts in your allocations is again is something that you can learn. And you don't have to rely on just what the financial market advisors tell you. They'll try to do the best there, but usually that's just moving from equities, from stocks, into annuities or bonds. Well, that's a very binary choice. I'm not saying that any of that's wrong, but is that all you've got? If that's all you've got, then I think you're very much at risk. That's why my belief in learning more about finance and how money works is so important. And I started doing that when I was still in college. So I go back decades of understanding that I need to learn this. It doesn't mean I don't ask other people. I don't need that I need to have other advisors that can weigh on specific topics, but I got to be the orchestrator of that. And that's what we do in a community. Community is so important to be around people that don't have an agenda on you, aren't trying to sell you something, but actually communities where people have your back and you can get really reliable points of view, perspective that you can't get from someone who's trying to sell you something. Again, that's just the way the markets work, the way that capitalism works. But most people, they're paid a fee or commission to provide financial advice of any kind. They're going to have a bias. Even if they try not to have a bias, they're going to have a bias, and they're going to try to direct you into what they know or what they sell, produce. A piece of whatever they provide, advise, or sell could be fine, but you've got to be the orchestrator of that. That comes back to how we build and create, but also maintain autonomy, because financial freedom, financial independence, is really the key, the base of what I call the five freedoms. Until you have financial freedom, independence, a level of certainty and confidence in what you have, then gaining time freedom, the freedom of time to use our time the way we want to, not necessarily just to have to retire, but just working, living on our own terms, is via time. And we don't consider time. We give away our time. We give away our time way too long, way too many years in the means to build more and more and more. But if it's all about us, then we miss many years of our life and that freedom and autonomy that I discovered some 20 years ago was a game changer for me. I never saw that in my future. I thought I would run the regular course of doing my work, doing my profession, much the same way, just trying to build, and never knowing how much is enough. My daughter's predicament, her health crisis, forced me to determine how much was enough at that time, 20 plus years ago, when my back of the napkin mathematic calculations showed me that I had enough at that time to sell my practice and leave it for at least a couple years, thinking I would go back again because I would get bored, as probably most of you would, if I'm not doing anything productive. And at that point, my only productivity was what I learned through academia. It's to be the best dentist I could, and to invest in myself in that, and through that build value and build an income stream, and employ other people. And that's all a great run. But if there's no way to exit that, or no way to change the model without affecting our lifestyle, we're not free. If you can't leave that business for more than a long weekend, or maybe that 2-week vacation, then you come back to having to fix everything that went wrong, that's not true freedom. It's a means for a rich lifestyle, but it's not true freedom. And that's the change I try to impart to people who are doing great work in their field, in their business, doing great work. But the burnout comes. The burnout comes. It's either burnout mentally or physically or both. Great athletes who make a lot of money early in their career, the smart ones with good people around them, make sure that they understand that this run rate that you have is short lived, because as an athlete, your body can only go hard and produce the value proposition for so many years. And for many of those athletes, it's a relatively small number of years. For some, it's 3 or 4 or 5. A few get to 8 or 9 or maybe 10. But if they're not building a plan B, a future, while they're making the money doing their active work in their athletic profession, then they've got nothing to go back to. And many find that problem. They live high on the hog during those active income years because the money's everywhere and they've never seen so much in their life and it feels good. And then as soon as the injury happens, as soon as uh, their contract expires, no one picks them up. Then it's a slap in the face down the bottom. And there's story after story after story of that very thing. Now, we're not in that same position in terms of making that kind of money on the front end of our career. But ours is a gradual increase in income, as it should be, by working hard, putting the time and effort into it. And we elevate our lifestyle as we go along. So the same trap happens. It just happens a little bit later in life. And particularly my my privilege to talk to a lot of dentists in different stages of life. I find those that are mid-career, and particularly those who are towards the end, the latter stages, or what they hope to be the latter stages of having to have active income, are finding that they're in that trap, and that they didn't plan well, and they put their hope and prayers into the 401k, the magical 401k, and they're realizing it wasn't really cut out and built to do everything that they thought or they were told it would do. It can be a piece, it can be an adjunct, not taking that away, but if not building additional income streams outside of qualified retirement accounts, well, one, you're just locking yourself down to not being able to exit anything until you're 59 and a half. Well, that wouldn't have worked for me. I exited when I was in my 40s. If I had everything stacked up in a 401k and been the diligent, disciplined investor in that model, it would have been very tenuous for me to try to leave my practice, because I would have to pull money out of that 401k. I would have to pay tax and penalty. That's not a game I want to play. I don't want to be anybody trapping me. And that's a societal trap, or a financial trap that many walk right into head first, not realizing what they're doing. My job is just to help people kind of wake up to the possibilities, to wake up to what is possible, to change your way of thinking, to challenge the paradigms and the financial models that have been basically pounded into our brain for many years by well-meaning people, and also those who make their money off of pounding that same mantra into our heads. It's not just me that learned this lesson. I've been around many entrepreneurs who have the same philosophy and theory of life because they've lived it. And maybe they didn't do it all through alternative investments, but understanding the changing of thinking from always being the doer, the technical doer in everything you do, has got a limit. Naval Ravikant says very well. He says, "You'll never become wealthy by renting your time. You'll never become wealthy by renting your time. You start there. You start there by renting that time, but you've got to get to a point where your time is allowable to you because you've got other sources of income that aren't reliant on you." So before I finish up here, I do want to mention that for those of you who have been following me this week, I've got a gift for you, and there's no caveats, no catches to this gift. A few years ago, I co-authored this book, Own Your Freedom, with one of my longtime mentors, Dan Kennedy. Dan and I wrote this book together, looking at our own lives and what we've learned about financial acumen, but also we both had the blessing and opportunity to help hundreds of other entrepreneurs. Dan in a very entrepreneurial space, me mostly with my professional practice colleagues, but bring together what we both learned, and we put that into a really nice book. If you will just type the word book, BOOK, into the chat, then my team will take care of it and send you a book, and it's free. There's no catches to it. It's free. It's yours. And I hope that those of you who take us up on that offer will actually read the book, because there is a ton of wisdom in that book. I'm not just speaking for myself, but Dan Kennedy, who has been one of my great mentors for decades now. It was a privilege to write that book with him, because we each brought a lot of insights to the table, and made it. I think it's a very readable book as well. It's not boring. I'll put it that way. So that book is there for you. So here's what I'd like to leave you with today. Just a few final questions. One is, think about, what does freedom really mean to you? What does it mean to you? Does it mean that you have certain choices, like you can choose your work and your profession, which you've done? Is that it though? Are there constraints that you're putting on yourself because you have limiting beliefs about what that needs to look like? Is there a way to challenge yourself? Maybe just by getting the book, Own Your Freedom, would challenge you to think differently. I know that being around other wise people that have gone down the road or up the mountain ahead of me has always been beneficial, because I love to be challenged. The way I think may be accurate for the moment I'm in and accurate to how I've grown up, but is it truly accurate in gaining the freedom that I want? So challenge is, what does freedom really mean to you? Secondly, are you able to identify some constraints that you have accepted as normal in your life? Again, those are the limiting beliefs that many times we've grown up with, and we believe that this is the way you do it. And I would challenge you to always ask, is that the only way? Is there really truth in that? I've learned in my life to respectfully, keyword respectfully, challenge virtually everybody. I challenge Dan Kennedy when he says something and I don't understand it. It doesn't mean it's not true, but I challenge it until I can understand it. Or maybe it's not a belief I have. So challenge your own thinking, because you'd be surprised how much of it is unfortunately inaccurate. And until we determine what's accurate, what's inaccurate, we're going to stay stuck on that treadmill. And there's no sense in doing that, not in this day and age. Finally, decide, what will you change? What will you change in how you invest in yourself, in other means of education, or walk away from to regain control and autonomy in your own life? What will you decide to change, invest in, or walk away completely to have the autonomy you want? I ended up walking away completely from dentistry. Wasn't the plan. Didn't think I would walk away completely, but I have no regrets. It was a great model to a point, and I evolved. And I evolved only because I invested myself in other ways outside of my profession. Yes, did it take time? Did it take a focus? Did I have to really balance a lot during those early years? But yes, that was the sacrifice period. You can sacrifice now to some extent today to make some major inflection points, or you can decide to sacrifice later when the opportunity is not there for you, because you don't have the energy, you don't have the time capacity, maybe your health is not there. Better to do some sacrifice now and understand what the plan is, and not just getting on another evolving treadmill, but have a real plan. Without a plan, your life may be one of wealth in terms of richness in materialism, but in your heart, there's something missing. I challenge you to find out what that is. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. Stay tuned, because every day this week, all the way through the 4th, coming up on Friday, I'll be having discussions, and tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, I'll be having some of my guests back on again to have conversations around this very topic. I hope you will join me then. Until then, enjoy the rest of the day, enjoy the week, and I'll talk to you soon.